Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Foxy and this is Foxy Books and Planning. Happy Midsummer? Or is it Midsummer? I think it's Midsummer. Anyway, this is my reading wrap up for the month of June. So this is where I go through all of the books I've finished, all the books I'm working on, and the books that I want to read in the next month. Give you kind of an overview about how I felt about the books I finished, and take an overall look to see how much reading I actually managed to get done in the month. If you saw my May video, I wasn't super happy with my May list because I had read 5 books, but a lot of them were shorter audiobooks, if I remember correctly. Actually, no, there were a bunch of long audiobooks, but it wasn't a really great reading month for me. And I feel like I really turned it around in June. I'm really proud of myself this month. This month marks the most physical or most written word books I've finished in a month in at least 4 years. And that's something I'm really proud of, and I hope to carry that momentum forward. Before I get into this, there's also one tiny disclaimer. One of the books, actually 3 of the books that I'm going to talk about briefly, were sent to me for review by NetGalley. So they are books that are not available to the public just yet. I was very, very thankful and very, very lucky to get the ARCs. And I will be doing a separate video about those later on, but I did not purchase them. They were sent to me for fair and honest review. That being said, let's get into the things I finished this month. So the first book I finished this month was Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. This is the first book in a series. Not sure if it's a trilogy, not sure if it's going to be longer. I do know the second book is coming out later this year, and I'm super excited for it. I gave this book 5 stars. And I talked a little bit in my mid-year book freakout tag video about I was really surprised by this. I went into this having read the first 50 pages, was very intrigued by the premise, but was also hesitant because I've read a lot of YA fantasies that started out really promising and just kind of fell off in the execution towards the end. And I think part of this was that there was an array, or what made this book so great was the array of characters. This is a crew of young adults who are planning a heist to steal a mystical artifact from a secret cabal of magically inclined families in an alternate universe, Earth, where God destroyed the Tower of Babel, and the fragments scattered across the world, and the fragments give people powers. It's called forging in this, where you imbue items with some sort of mystical energy. And so they're hunting down relics because the leader of the crew wants to reinstate his family, which has been determined to be extinct. And he's promised each of the members something in return. And I really enjoyed all of the characters. I enjoyed the plot. I liked the fact that if I never get to read the second book, it's a fully contained story, which is one of my big pet peeves with a lot of young adult series, is that the first book at least tends to be a lot of world building and not a lot happening, and then the plot gets going in the last 50 or so pages. This is a contained story, which is a miracle, and I love it, and I'm here for it, and I'm so excited for the next book. Next on my list is How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps by Andrew Rowe. I had this as an Audible original that I believe I got in the month of May. I gave this 5 stars. So this is, how do I explain this? This is a satirical retelling of video game tropes. So we're following a character whose name is Yui Shaw. And she lives in a world with a hero who is reincarnated every 70 years and a demon king who, in the 70-year gap, tries to take over as much of the world as possible. And Yui has decided that she is done. She's going to wreck the system. She doesn't want to wait for the hero. She's going to be her own hero. And so she sets out on a quest to defeat the Demon King. And there are a lot of silly references and tropes and things that happen that if you are well versed in fantasy video games, which I was not as well versed as my significant other was when he read it. So I was having to be like, wait, what? This is oh, okay. So it's a lot of references that if you have never played the source materials, it becomes kind of a, huh? And then when someone explains it to you, you're like, oh, that's hilarious. But I really enjoyed this because I knew just enough to make it funny. And I liked the cast of characters. They were all one-dimensional, but they were intentionally one-dimensional because video game characters are intentionally one-dimensional in the things that the author is referencing. It was a fast-paced Audible original. I was really, really excited to listen to it. It wasn't one of those books where I was like, gosh, I've got to listen to more of this. It was like, come on, I want to finish it. Let's go. Let's see how this ends. And I really hope there's a sequel someday. But if there's not, I'm quite happy with what I have. The next one is another Audible original that I got in the month of May. This is The Getaway by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. I gave this 3 stars. I picked this up mainly because 1, it was a thriller, and 2, it was from Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, who wrote An Anonymous Girl that I read earlier this year. And it was free. Free is great. So in this one, it's very, very short. It's like 2 hours. It could be a Lifetime movie, if I'm honest. It probably will be a Lifetime movie someday. But you're following this woman whose name I forget, who is going on a yoga retreat for a weekend after her job goes away because the candidate that she was supporting lost an election. And when she gets to this retreat, weird things start happening. And how do I do this without spoiling it? It's so short. Basically, things start to happen, secrets are revealed, weird, creepy things happen, and it ends. Most of the reason I gave it 3 stars was I felt like it would either A, needed to just be a Lifetime movie and not a written book or short story, or 2, it needed to be fleshed out into a full-length thriller, because I didn't feel like in the shortness of the audiobook, we really got a chance to allow the characters to breathe or allow the situations to develop. It was very, come on, time is ticking, gotta go, which I appreciate, but whoa, Nancy. I felt like there was a lot of things that could be fleshed out, or it needed to be a Lifetime movie. And that is where I will leave that. But it was a really fun, quick listen. If you have sort of I wouldn't call it a long drive because it's only 2 hours, but if you have a medium length drive coming up, I would say use it as something to listen to in one sit while you drive. All right, my next one, very, very exciting, The Toll by Neil Shusterman, which is the last book in the Arc of the Scythe. I had this as an ebook from my library and I gave it 4 stars. I think I read this in like 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 tops, and it's long. And while I did enjoy it, I found it to be a satisfying ending. I found that it wasn't as good a book as Thunderhead was. And this is really weird because normally in trilogies, the second book is the weakest book in the series. And personally, I like Thunderhead more than Scythe and The Toll. Again, trying not really hard not to spoil things. My biggest gripe with this was that there were too many plots going on. So in the first book, we had our main plot with I forget their names now. Cinna or Sintra, and our two main scythe apprentices. And it was basically a very straightforward plot. And then in Thunderhead, we have Scythe Anastasia's plot, Scythe Lucifer's plot, and then we have Greg Tolliver, I want to say is his name. Tolliver is what I'll call him here, who's kind of an ancillary character who is very much in tune with the Thunderhead, which is the benevolent AI that runs the world. And in this book, we're following Anastasia, Lucifer, Tolliver, Scythe Faraday, and then there were other things in the book that when you're seeing them initially, you have an idea of what's happening, but it gets explained later on in the book, and it's just like, that's great. I didn't need these. And like the Scythe Faraday plot, it pops up very heavily at the beginning of the book and very heavily at the end of the book, and it basically gets forgotten in the middle. And I really appreciated the ending. I appreciated what they did, or what Neal Shusterman did with the story, but I feel like he could have cut out some of the plot lines and made it a shorter, tighter story overall. But I highly recommend the Arc of the Scythe trilogy to anybody who likes YA or science fiction. There is a little bit of romance, but not a lot of romance, and I appreciated that immensely in a young adult book. And I felt like the relationships were more real, the character progression was more real, and I just overall really, really enjoyed this series. Next is The Whisper Man by Alex North. I had this also as a library ebook, 4 stars. Did I give this 4 stars? I thought I gave this 3 stars. Please hold. It'll be like a second for you. Okay, correction. I gave The Whisper Man 3 stars out of 5. It has an average Goodreads rating of 4 stars. So why did I give it? Brief summary. The Whisper Man is a mystery thriller detective novel, but not really, sort of, kind of, where we are following a father, his son, and a cop as a series of murders, or a boy goes missing in a small town in England, and the boy's disappearance and subsequent murder are very similar to a series of murders that happened 25 years ago. And so the cop is trying to solve the murder, and the boy and his dad are trying to deal with grief as they live in the house where the original murderer lived and murdered the boys. This wasn't much of a thriller, if I am perfectly honest. It wasn't that much of a mystery either. It was very much a story about grief and about dealing with loss. Because the wife of the husband and mother of the boy has died tragically in the recent past, and that is why they have moved into this house in this town. And then you have the detective who, I'm not quite sure what was going on with the detective. I know he was drunk, but he's a recovered drunk, but he uses alcohol to test himself. And then there's a reporter and another detective who goes to the alcoholic detective for help. And it just didn't feel, it felt rushed for one. It was a very short thriller, I think just over 300 pages. There wasn't a very good twist. There is a twist, but it's not a very satisfying twist. The murder could have been more inventive, was kind of very basic and not really a mystery. And I just felt overall let down, because this was one of the books that was part of the Goodreads Awards last year for Best Mystery Thriller. And I'm just like, there are better books on that list. Like, for example, The Turn of the Key. Didn't particularly care for Turn of the Key, but it's an ostensibly better thriller. And I can see why someone who's new to mystery thriller or isn't very versed in mystery thrillers would be really into this, but it was just not for me. But I'm happy I read it because now I know it's not for me. Maybe I will give Alex North another chance. He does have another book coming out in the fall, so maybe I will try that one. But for right now, not super happy with Alex North. Probably won't pick him up to read again. Moving from one incredibly disappointing mystery thriller to an incredibly satisfying mystery thriller. So the last book I finished this month is The Guest List by Nancy Foley. I gave this 5 stars. This one was a new release this month. It came out June the 2nd. And I went out and bought it the day it came out because I had seen it on Book of the Month. Its plot summary sounded very, very up my alley because it sounded a whole lot like And Then There Were None. And I was not disappointed. Now, I will say initially, I was not thrilled with the way this is written. So we are following, and I'm going to flip it over the back, the bride, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, and the bridesmaid. They all have point of view chapters. And the way this book is structured is we start so it takes place over 2 days on a remote Irish island during a wedding of, what are their names? Will and Jules. So they're getting married on this remote island. It's a fabulous affair. And so we start with the wedding and then we flash back to the day before. And so all of the point of view chapters happen in the past, but we keep flashing forward to get more and more of the story of the wedding. And it's really good because you know up front somewhere someone is going to get murdered, but the murder payoff doesn't come until the very, very end. And once, it took me about 150, it took me a good chunk of the book to realize what was going on. But once I realized what the author was doing and why she had structured the book this way, it was like, oh my God, this is the most genius thing I've read in a while. Because there's overlapping stories, there's unreliable narrators. It's a wonderful little puzzle and a really quick read. And I was so happy to have finished this. Like, this was another one I finished very, very quickly. It's a very atmospheric. There isn't really plot driving it necessarily. It's more, let's meet all the characters, try to figure out what their motivations are, who's getting murdered, why they're getting murdered, because those things are like the big 2 questions. Is, you know, in the first couple of pages that someone has been murdered, but you have no idea who has been murdered. And so I spent a lot of the book trying to piece together who was murdered, why were they murdered, and who murdered them. And I really, really, really loved this. And while I figured everything out in the last, like, right before the book showed me, which was perfect. So it was like, everything clicked, I had my light bulb, and I went, oh. And that allowed me, and the minute I went, oh, the book hit me with the end, and it was absolutely amazing. I cannot recommend this highly enough for mystery thriller people, especially people who like Agatha Christie's more atmospheric, not detective novels. This was amazing. Highly, highly, highly recommend it, and it will probably be one of my best books of the year. Okay. Let's double check some stuff. Okay, so now to my in-progress books. Woo, this is a long video. So my first NetGalley arc is Espionage in the Divided Stuart Dynasty, 1685 to 1715 by Julian Whitehead, NetGalley ebook. I'm 21% of the way into it. I'm not sold on it right now because there isn't a whole lot of talk about espionage. There's a lot of Stuart history, but not a lot of espionage, which makes me kind of disappointed in the book's name. Next, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kersey. I have this as an audiobook from my library. I have made 52% progress over last month. I'm almost done with it. Hopefully I'll hold off on finishing it before I can edit this and post this.
Hi everyone, Editing Fox here. Yeah, I finished this book before I got a chance to edit and upload this video. I ended up giving One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest 3 stars, and the main reasoning behind this was that between the novel and the film adaptation from the 1970s starring Jack Nicholson, I feel that the film is a more effective story than the book. In the book, we're being told what has happened by our narrator Chief, who is a half Native American patient at the mental hospital, who is deaf and mute, or pretends to be deaf and mute, in order to stay under the radar of the other patients, um, but is actually quite intelligent and is the primary janitor of the ward. And the ward gets turned upside down when a new patient by the name of McMurphy shows up, and he has decided to take a commitment to a mental hospital instead of going to a work farm after he has been convicted of a crime. And we're relatively certain he's not crazy, but he turns the ward on its head. And the primary crux of the story is the conflict between McMurphy and Nurse Ratched. And that being said, one of the ways, or a couple of the ways that I found that the movie was superior to the book was that I didn't particularly think that having Chief narrate added a whole lot to the story, other than give some more private thoughts about how and more explanation about how the ward worked. I felt that Nurse Ratched, the physicality of the performance from the film, allowed the actress to be much more menacing, and there was more the menace and control that Nurse Ratched exerted over the ward is much more palpable in the film, and the manic actions of McMurphy, I think, also do much better coming from Jack Nicholson than being relayed from another person. However, I did still enjoy this book as a classic and sort of the beginning of the psychedelic era, and I would recommend it if it's something that you're really interested in, but personally, I would say check out the movie instead, and if you really enjoyed the movie, then maybe consider picking up the book afterwards. Now, with that, back to the rest of the video.
The next is another nonfiction book. This is The British Are Coming, the War for America, Lexington to Princeton, 1775 to 1777 by Rick Atkins. This is the first book in his Revolutionary War trilogy. I have this as an audiobook from my library. I am 54% of the way through it. Really enjoying it. It's really a deep dive into the American Revolution instead of just kind of hitting the major notes and moving on, and a period of history that I'm not super well versed about. So really excited to have this because Rick Atkinson is really a great historian. All right, next, Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. I did start this month as a library ebook, and I got 6% of the way through before I got caught up in reading a bunch of other stuff. Heart of Europe by Peter Wilson. I know, surprise! I have this as a personal audiobook from Audible. I made 5% progress this month, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when it's a 48-hour audiobook, 5% is like 3 hours. So, woo, progress! Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. I have this as a library audiobook. I made 8% progress over last month. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. Library ebook, no progress this month. The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Library audiobook, no progress this month. Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Library ebook, no progress. Give yourself a brownie if you thought I had made progress, if you knew I hadn't made progress on this month. And last but not least, Lord Foul's Bane by Stephen Donaldson, which I have as a personal ebook. No progress, no idea when I'm going to get to it. It's way at the back of the line right now. Probably soon, though. That brings us to our on deck section. So, as I said at the beginning, my two other net galleys that I have are in this section because I need to get them read in the next month, so I can, 1, make a video, and 2, write my reviews on NetGalley. So the first one I have is A History of Death in 17th Century England by Ben Norman. I'm morbid, I know. I'm really excited for it. And the last one is The Conductors by Nicole Glover. A History of Death in 17th Century England, I believe, comes out later this summer, and The Conductors doesn't come out till next year, so I was really surprised I got a NetGalley for this. But so those are my 2 books on deck. Hopefully I will get them read in the next month. Hopefully I will clear out my list as opposed to reading new things. Because, yeah, I got big plans for August. Big plans. So with that comes to my look back. Let's see how much progress I made. So I finished 6 books, 4 of which were actual written books, 2 of which were Audible originals. Woo! No audiobooks this month. It's weird. In progress, I have 1, 2, 3. I have 10 in progress, which is a lot, which is why I need to clear some stuff out. And then I have 2 on deck. And then in terms of cumulative percentage that I made progress on this month, I have 21, that's 73, 109, 115, 120% in progress. So if I had maybe focused on one thing, I might have finished another book this month, but alas, that is not what happened. I'm still really happy with this month. I read so many things this month, and I'm so happy, and hopefully I'll be able to get some of my audiobooks cleared out. I've just been having difficulty focusing at work, so the audiobooks really haven't been helping. But please comment down below. Let me know what you thought of any of the books I'm finished reading. Are you excited about the net galleys that I got? Please do remember to subscribe. I try to post once a week. If not, I do post a bunch of stuff towards the end of the month. And I hope to see you all in another video. Bye!